All right. Hello, everybody. Got this going, I think. My name is Dr. Anthony Horvath, the host of the Gutencast. Got a special episode coming up for you here real quick. Let me explain how it's going to work. I actually pre-recorded it to make sure that I said everything that I wanted to say. Now, my hat's kind of crooked. It's kind of bothering me. But I didn't edit it. So, it's going to be pretty natural flow to it. But this will also allow me to monitor the chat. So if you have questions or comments, I won't have to stop the podcast in order to reply to those. So I will be here. I will be listening to myself and watching myself. Dude, it's bothering me that my head's crazy like this. Feel free to drop in, say hello, all that other stuff. And without further ado, let's get right to the main show. Look at that. Look at that guy. Well, there, my name's Dr. Anthony Horvath. I'm the host of the Gutencast podcast and the owner of GutenBookPress.com, a writer and publisher. Recently in our podcast, we talked about the Sweeney thing, which people have been talking all about. And it was an entertaining podcast. Had a good time, but there was a lot of things that were left unsaid that I wanted to make a separate video where those things were said. I'll be repeating some of the elements of that original podcast, but there won't be much entertaining in this one. It's pretty much going to be strictly educational. I know something about eugenics, like actual eugenics. This Sweeney ad, it's not even close. Like, it's utterly disproportionate. And I'm not going to show the ad, but let me show one of some of the responses before we get started here.
You guys are complaining about that Sweeney jeans ad, so I went and saw it. That's Nazi propaganda. Wow.
I will be the friend that's too woke because those Sweeney American Eagle ads are weird. Like fascist weird. Like Nazi propaganda weird.
This is Nazi pure Nazi
Yeah, okay. So these people know absolutely nothing about the topic. Clearly they have never actually studied what the Nazis believed or why or how. They saw a couple lines in their social studies textbook in high school, and now they think they know something. Unfortunately, there are people who are piling on who ought to know better, and that is one reason why I'm making this video. People who have studied a little bit more, I've seen sharing posts talking about like how what such a harbinger of things of horror in our society. The problem is that besides not being even close to being a question of eugenics, actual eugenics is being implemented and has been implemented in our society now for decades and decades. And no one's talking about that. No one's complaining about that. No one's up in arms about that. And that's a frustration for me, that people who ought to know better, I'm sure they care. Maybe they are somewhat cognizant of some of these issues, would get bent out of shape because of the Sweeney ad. No, I mean, it's like if a kindergartner insults you. I mean, if you're a grown person, that doesn't bother you at all. the Sydney Sweeney ad is so infantile from the perspective of the actual scale and scope of eugenics as deployed in our society. You know, it's like laughable. Like, it doesn't even compare. So anyway, that's what kind of launched it. But let me get into it. First, let me share the personal story, because this is how I became involved in this. And you know, in the defense of a lot of people, I didn't know this stuff. I was boy, how old was I? 35, 30, 32. And I was, you know, have been a Christian for a long time. I was pro life, and much of this stuff was new to me. So I'm not necessarily blaming people for being ignorant necessarily, but I mean, educate yourself before you speak would be great. So here's the story of how I got involved in this topic. We'd already had 3 kids. We were on the next pregnancy, and we were at the 20-week ultrasound. And my wife and I were obviously excited about the future. You know, we were hoping for a girl because we had 3 boys, and they were destroying us, our house. You know, anyway, a girl would have been a nice change of pace, and that's what we're kind of hoping for. And the ultrasound tech did assure us finally, oh yeah, it's a girl. But the ultrasound tech was also very, very quiet and got quieter as the session went on. And long story short, we were shown into another room to talk with the doctor, who said it's pretty likely that your daughter actually has spina bifida. And they scheduled a follow-up to confirm. And we had about an hour-ish between that appointment and the confirmation appointment. And in that hour, we learned as much about spina bifida as we could. You can't really learn a whole lot in an hour, but, you know, we did our best. As you can imagine, we were shell-shocked by this information. We did not have our other children didn't have special needs. So there's no like preparation from that point of view. You know, we just had assumed that we were going to have a healthy child, and had not considered the possibility that it could be otherwise. And I suppose that's on us. We shouldn't have had that assumption. Anyway, so we went to the second level appointment, and it didn't take very long before the doctor was able to say fairly definitively, because he did the amniocentesis test, yeah, your daughter has spina bifida. And here's the thing. Here's the kicker. Bear in mind, all of the knowledge that we've been able to gain about this condition had been acquired in the previous like half hour to 45 minutes. That was all the information that we had. Without missing a beat, really, the doctor said, so I guess now we need to talk about, you know, whether or not you're actually going to keep this child. Basically, inviting us, facilitating. The question put to us in so many words was, your baby has spina bifida. Do you want to kill it? That's quite the burden, or I don't know if that's the word, to put on somebody in that situation, based on that level of knowledge. And he wasn't going to take the time to give us any more information. We were just supposed to run with that. Well, my wife said there's no way that was going to happen. And so the doctor was not happy with that. And he made that clear over the following months while we waited for the birth. That's a different story. But then after this, we were shown immediately to the genetic counselor. And this is where things got really strange. The genetic counselor was there to find, now we were going to actually get some information about spina bifida. So I guess we'll give some credit on that. I mean, this was after the moment of decision had already been presented to us, but better late than never, I guess. So we went and saw the genetic counselor, and the genetic counselor, he gave us some information about spina bifida. Beyond the basics, the problem with talking about spina bifida while the child is still in the womb is that there are so many variations on what the actual outcome is going to be. The severity of the condition depends on just a ton of stuff. So beyond the absolute basics, there's really nothing he could tell us about that. And since we'd already decided that there was no question that we were going to keep the kid, he had like nothing else to say. Like he just kind of sat there like a rotten potato, because basically, as I've come to learn, the fundamental role of the genetic counselor is to get you to a point where you can decide if you want to kill your kid. That's not a fair way. I'm sure there's very nice genetic counselors, some earnest people. I'm sure some of them have no idea about the history of their own profession. I had a feeling later on in my interactions with him that he didn't know. But it was interesting. I don't know. When did we come back there? Was it after she was born? Not really sure. Probably because I had already done quite a bit of research at that point. Sat across from him and made sure that he saw my daughter. Saw that, yeah, she had spina bifida, but she was otherwise beautiful. And I looked on his bookshelf, and yeah, there were all the books that had the history of his profession, and I recognized quite a few of them. So if he read them, he ought to have known. So that's how I came to want to study this issue. I mean, basically the question in my mind was, how could we be in a society where pretty much literally the first question put to somebody when they are told their child has a birth defect is, do you want to kill it? This had already been going on for a long time. I didn't know that, right? So this was all, I was blindsided by this, and I had to understand it. I had to know how it could be. I needed to know the why. And long story short, it tracks back to the eugenics movement. It tracks back to applied Darwinism. It tracks back to Malthus. In a very, very short synopsis, I'm going to be developing this more for folks, but the very short synopsis is that there were people, I guess I don't need to put a time frame on it quite yet, who observed that natural selection used to weed out the unfit, and that was actually good because it made for a better population and evolutionary advances of the species. And so the problem was, if in our modern society, what with our compassion and sentimentality, we're allowing the unfit to live, and worse, reproduce in their minds, right? Valuable resources of the species we're going to waste on these people who are basically dead weight, baggage. What did Binding and Hawk call it in allowing the destruction useless eaters. Hey, that sounds like actual Nazism, doesn't it? I don't think Sydney Sweeney said anything about that. These are great genes. If you're not a useless eater, that would have been eugenics. That would have been something like actual like Nazism. Using the word genes, even though it was obviously a play on words, just uttering that word doesn't automatically mean you're talking about genetics. Just like if I use the word cow, doesn't mean that suddenly I'm a dairy farmer. I mean, it's absolutely incoherent. If you are even slightly intelligent and modestly informed. So anyway, this is the situation. Then the disabled people of the world are being ruthlessly hunted right now by the very people, not intentionally. Sometimes, most of the time, we even say the very people who say they're for the rights of disabled people are happy to see them killed in the womb. We just saw, as I'm going to this, I saw the headline that the governor of Minnesota just passed a law allowing abortion up to the day of birth. Many of the states have laws carving out exceptions. In other words, they might be restrictive on abortion, but they carve out these exceptions, unless there's like some sort of genetic abnormality. And obviously in Europe, this is all this has been going on for like a long time. And we're going to come back around to that. The people who support abortion on demand and these exceptions claim to be in support of disabled people, but I guess there's limits to their quote compassion. I'm not gonna. Well, I'm sure I'll come back around to that because it kind of fires me up. So this is this information. I decided to use an outline. Let me switch to it. I should mention that I'm trying to do this in as few takes as possible, because if I have to go back and edit this, it'll just never happen. We'll get rid of that for a minute here. I'm using an outline from a presentation that I did on this about 10 years ago. It is 32 pages. We're not going to do all 32 pages today. But I say this because, I've been off of the lecture circuit for some time, but if you're watching this and you're thinking, we need to bring Dr. Horvath in and talk about this and inform and educate us about these things, because I'm not necessarily trying to knock people who don't know things. One of the things that we're gonna talk about is how these eugenicists actually explicitly hid their goals and their aims because they knew that politically it wouldn't fly. I mean, they knew that. So it's okay in a sense to not be aware that these things are going on beneath the waves, so to speak. Anyway, so if you want me to come and talk about this, I mean, I guess I'm happy to consider that. But it has been a while since I have done presentations on this. This particular presentation that I'm talking about here, if I remember correctly, was a 4-hour presentation split into 2 parts. Maybe it was even 6 hours split into 2 parts. So there's a lot of content to cover. And if anyone cares, supposedly we care about what experts think. I ended up pursuing my doctorate in philosophy, and I used every single opportunity that I could to study Darwinian ethics in light of my experiences, right? So what I found in terms of if you're one is like referring to an expert, there are certain people in our society who instantly defer to an expert, and all of their arguments boil down to some expert somewhere. Experts say, "Oh, who do you think you are? Are you an expert?" Or what did what's her face on the Supreme Court say when asked about what a woman was? Well, I'm not a biologist, so I guess she doesn't know. Right? The experts say, "Well, I'm about as pretty close to being an expert on this as you're going to find." There are people who know more than me on this, but not a lot, which is kind of the problem. But my expertise is going to be thrown out the window. Who cares what that expert thinks? Because they pick and choose which experts they care about. I don't care about the credentials, to tell you the truth. I care about the truth. I care about the evidence. I believe that any ordinary person who wants to seek the truth can figure it out. And if they've got the truth, they don't need it doesn't have any more weight than if it's possessed by someone with a credential. But if you care about that, if you think credentials matter, hey, I guess technically I've got some. So anyway, like I said, the people who disagree with me are going to suddenly forget that they care about what experts think. I think I digressed a little bit. All right, let's go back to this here. So, rather than go through this in order, I thought I would start with something that came up early when I was learning about this subject and studying it. And this was actually this is 2012. So it would have been about 5 years after my daughter was born. This is Professor Julian Savulescu. He's an expert in practical ethics. That's what it says kind of like everywhere. Practical ethics. Whew. Wow. He must be really smart, right? It's our duty to have designer babies, he said. This was in the Reader's Digest in the UK, which is basically a lost country at this point. Anyway, I don't know if it was in the American version or not, but it was in the UK. And if you know what's happened in the UK, they have actually recently made significant progress in euthanasia and assisted suicide. Well, assisted suicide, euthanasia is coming because it's the UK and they just can't stand in the way of progress, can they? So this is the first page of this article, and you really can't. This is not where the juicy stuff is, but he's talking about genetic screening. Okay. So, like, if you could ensure that your child had red hair, would it be ethical to do that? I mean, I'm sure he has an opinion, but he thinks that society should take a firmer hand on what kinds of people are actually allowed to live. So let's go to the second page here. I shouldn't say to live. He might take offense to that. To even exist. So a little bit hard to read for me. Let me see if I can make this bigger. That'll be all right. So isn't rational design something we should welcome? This is at the very top there. If we have the power to intervene the nature of our offspring rather than consigning them to the natural lottery, we should. Surely trying to ensure that your children have the best or a good enough opportunity for a great life is only responsible parenting. Some people believe babies are a gift of God or nature. We shouldn't mess with it. But he says we already implicitly reject this view. We are routinely screening embryos and fetuses for conditions such as cystic fibrosis and Down syndrome, and there's little public outcry. my point. Okay? My point. And he's going to, and as we read this, he's going to explicitly describe this as eugenics. So this is actually happening. This is 2012. So this was already well in progress even as he's writing. And it's obviously even more in progress now. This is actual eugenics. And there's little public outcry. But some chick puts on a pair of jeans and says she's got good genes, and people lose their freaking mind. What's your malfunction? Get your head out. Come on, people. Anyway. Yeah, so I get a little fired up. It's my lived experiences coming through. And lived experiences justify any behaviors. That's what I've heard. Anyway, very few people protested at the decisions in the mid-2000s to allow couples to test embryos for breast cancer genes, etc. We're a lot closer to creating designer humans. Anyway, that last paragraph here starts to get into the stuff that is a little bit more frightening. A critical question to ask when considering whether to screen for some gene is, will it benefit the unborn child? It may not be entirely clear-cut as to whether it's better to be lazy or hardworking or monogamous or polygamous, but there are certain capacities that are good to have no matter what one wants to do in life. An excellent memory, for example, and a hot temper can land you in prison. If it were possible to genetically select good impulse control, we should do so. Or, right, if what you wanted was a compliant society that would defer to a totalitarian dictator, then you could also decide to take the reins of human evolution and do that too. And who would know, who would care, who would even notice before it was too late. But Julian Savulescu, he's way too smart to recognize the problems with that. Or is he? His next paragraph continues to get intense. Much of the unease about designer babies comes from the work of the 20th century eugenics movement. It tried to use selective breeding to weed out criminals, the insane, and the poor, based on the false belief that such conditions were caused only by genetic disorders. It reached its inglorious climax when the Nazis moved beyond sterilization to exterminate the genetically unfit. Okay, so first of all, let's just be sure we notice the word eugenics there. This is where he himself, this brilliant man, the man of many credentials, he's a smart guy. He's telling you right now where it all started. And I do want to call attention to the offhanded the scary thing said there in the middle. The problem, he said, of the earliest 20th century eugenics movement is they wanted to weed out criminals insane based on the false belief that such conditions were caused only by genetic disorders. So in other words, what he's saying is, like, if actually those things were based on genetic disorders, then it would have been fine. Would have been no problem. The fact that they determined later on that those things were not actually directly tied to ancestry is just, lucky for us, I guess. But, had that been the case at the time, the eugenicists would have been completely justified in doing so. And, God forbid in 5, 10, 15, 20 years, they decide again, we've reconsidered. And now we actually do believe that poverty is tied to genetics. Maybe they'll just conclude that. And then it would be on the table again, right? It reached its inglorious climax when the Nazis moved beyond sterilization to exterminate the genetically unfit. So I have to give them props here because a lot of people don't realize this. The liberals that I had in that first video clip don't know that the Nazis tried to did exterminate the genetically unfit. They know about the Jews and maybe something about the views on the disabled, but they don't know about the Nazi T4 project, where tens of thousands, if not hundreds of thousands, of disabled people were rounded up, and the actual engineering that was used in the concentration camps originally came from the Nazi efforts to find a way to dispose of the disabled people, right? So that was Nazism for real. Disabled people, that was Nazism. Yeah, there was the better fit families and whatnot. There was like another side of it, but anyway, maybe we'll come back around to that. I get fired up. He says what was especially objectionable about this movement was the coercive imposition of a state vision for a healthy population. Modern eugenics. This is actual eugenics now that we're talking about here. This is not some silly ad. It's not an ad campaign. It's not a silly offhand play on words or even an intentional play on words, however you want to put it. This is actual modern eugenics from a scholar only about a few years ago, and this guy is practicing his professorial stuff somewhere. I forget where it is. It might still be in Oxford, but I don't know that for sure. This is modern eugenics right here. Modern eugenics have made it absolutely clear that now we are talking about eugenics. Modern eugenics, from testing for diseases to deciding whether you want a girl or boy, is voluntary. But this is nonetheless eugenics. So where genetic selection aims to bring out a trait that clearly benefits an individual and society, we should allow parents the choice. And to do otherwise is to consign those who come after us to the ball and chain of our own squeamishness and irrationality. The old word would have been sentimentality. So this is genetic selection. It's modern eugenics. It talks about bringing out aims that benefit individual and society. That's really an important part of what actual real eugenics was. It's not it's eugenics was defined as the control of the utilization of forces under the control of the state, just to sort of summarize it. Like that was in order to improve the species. That was eugenics. So this is right up that alley. It's not an individual thing. Society has a say in it. And he goes on and says this at the very, now we get into the genetic counseling part here. Move this over for a minute. I can't highlight it because it's an image. That on the right side, third column, I guess, as you're looking at it, that doesn't necessarily imply that people should be coerced into making a choice, but we should encourage them. We should encourage them. That is the part where the genetic counselor comes in. But also public pressure, as some of the quotes that I'll share talk about. That's the state has a say in what constitutes a better child. So anyway, this is I guess we'll just finish this thing up. The announcement this summer of the first whole genome sequencing of a fetus means that within the next 5 years, we may be able to screen for every gene that determines who we are physically and psychologically. Because obviously everything about a human reduces to just matter, right? That's their view. Whether we like it or not, the future of humanity is in our hands now. Rather than fearing genetics, we should embrace it. We can do better than chance. Ooh, man, what a psycho. I'm sorry, did I say that out loud? He's a respected scientist with lots of credentials. Obviously, it must be true. Now, before we go further, I have to explain something that was alluded to in his essay, but not. It's going to become more important as we proceed, and that is things changed after the Nazis did their thing. The eugenics movement changed. A lot of the utopian visions of the progressives changed. They were already World War I already did a lot of damage to that, and World War II was the final nail in the coffin. And so you don't really even the term progressive fell out of use for 30 or 40 years, only because the progressives were on the forefront of all this stuff. Little known fact. And they are once again on the forefront of it, but now it's become respectable. With when it became clear what the Nazis did, the eugenicists had a real problem. They still believed in the core principles of eugenics, or the need for eugenics and the desire for eugenics, and even the appropriateness of eugenics. But there's no way they could possibly say that out loud. It just would not politically fly. And to be completely clear, even they were a little bit shocked that their own ideas had come to such a position. In fact, I have a website here. It's a website that I run. It's my website. Let's see here. Oh, I thought I had it ready to go. It was I have a collection of eugenicists saying things pre World War II, saying there's no reason to think anything bad will happen from any of this stuff. Yeah, so they couldn't conceive of even the possibility that it could go bad, but it did go bad, and they felt that they had to find a way to bring it back. But obviously, the coercion part had to go. There were many who wished, even after they witnessed what happened after World War II and then whatnot. They would, if they could have gotten away with coercion, they would have, but they knew that they couldn't. And obviously they would never have approved of concentration camps and whatnot. I mean, they're civilized people. So they decided to work on covert, deploying eugenics through covert means based on what was the thing from Savulescu? What did he say? It was encourage. Yes, we should encourage them. How can we encourage people to make the best decisions for the species, right? And so I have a collection of their quotes. C.P. Blacker here. This is from their own minutes. The society's activities in crypto-eugenics should be pursued vigorously. Crypto-eugenics, he's calling it. Was there anything else in this quote I wanted to say? Well, here we go. I mean, there's many components to this, but I mean, this is interesting, right? The society should concentrate on the eugenic aspects of current problems, She campaigned for the control of immigration and the reduction of the total population of Great Britain. This is going to be important. So there's a lot of population control stuff even now that comes up, and people don't understand or recognize or realize that the early promoters of population control were eugenicists. They had eugenics considerations in mind, and they still do today. Because if you start asking yourself, if we can only have so many people, you obviously begin asking the next question, but what kind of people? And I actually have a book, a very funny book. I mean, it's funny to me, of a guy in the essay complaining about all the population control measures and saying, hold on, my fellow population control people. We need to make sure that this particular group is not targeted for population control. We want them to have as many kids as possible. Anyway, and he was afraid his people were going to be caught up in the dragnet, so to speak. Anyway, so the other thing that to call attention to here, right here. Yeah, I mean, that's all very, I can get bogged down in every little part of this. The crypto eugenics, I think this is something that a lot of people don't realize, and they ought to. And I'm not going to, in this particular presentation, I'm not going to emphasize it too much. But when the eugenics movements, the crypto eugenics movement, thought about how they should proceed, their thought was family planning. And hey, can we get the Planned Parenthood people involved? So yeah. So if you're in the abortion on demand camp, and you think you're the compassionate one, the sympathetic one, the one who cares about humans, and so that's why you fully support abortion on demand up to the day of birth or beyond. After birth abortion, infanticide proponents use the same arguments. Just remember that the funding and the support came largely from eugenicists like Margaret Sanger, who founded the organization. Yeah. Anyway, actually, I'll just click on it here. Margaret Sanger, Human Weeds. She's explicitly describes, and I have it on my website, a whole essay where she explicitly says that eugenics and family planning are basically the same thing. So take it from someone who knows, the founder of the organization. Okay, so I could go on. I will come back to some of this stuff here, but to sort of finish the point. Here we go. That they had to sort of change their approach. We have, I offer this quote here by Sheldon Reed, someone that you don't know anything about. You can read yourself where it was from, but he says, there's no important distinction between research in pure genetics and the research in applied genetics, such as eugenics. Our present-day use of the term human genetics instead of eugenics may be financially and politically expedient, but there is no great philosophical difference between them. I mean, so yes, that illustrates my point. And there I could provide many illustrations of where they're like, well, hey, we just can't use this anymore. Eugenics has a bad rap, so let's stay away from it. Lots of them, and it all was because of Hitler and all that stuff. But this guy here, you're like, what do I care about some random guy named Sheldon Reed? Who gives a rip? Oh, well, see, Sheldon Reed was one of the primary formers of the entire genetic counseling discipline, we'll call it. He's like the guy, and he was in Minnesota, of course. And I'm sure there are some things that I think there were some, how do I put this? Like, just because we call someone a eugenicist doesn't necessarily mean that we're saying he's a bad man. Although I'm not particularly fond of a lot of them myself. But actually some of them were very nice. They loved their family, and they had sort of this bleeding heart desire to improve the lives of people and society or whatnot. And Sheldon Reed was like that. I mean, I understand that I'm sure many of his encounters, he was generally trying to help parents cope with difficult diagnoses about their child. And to be fair, also, actually, he would not have been around very much when there was anything that could be done from the during the birth, because the ultrasound technology was still coming. He worked with like probabilities. The parents would come, they'd share their family history and say, what are the odds we're going to have a child that is a loser? And he would help them. Nice guy. Anyway, he's the guy. And I just showed you the quote that he sees no difference between study of pure genetics and applied genetics. They're the one and the same. There is no great philosophical difference between them. And he's the guy that created, that's too strong of a word, facilitated the rise of this entire field. The guy who sat across from me, my wife and I, shortly after hearing about the diagnosis, he was a guy who was in the field made by this guy. And he's, I'm going easy. He said other things that a lot of people would consider despicable. And of course, yeah, like I said, in some ways he was a nice guy. Well, let's see if we can ground this even further. So where did he get into this? Well, let's see here. This is a very nice article that sums it up very well. So let's just get down to the right spot here. Here we go. This is the paragraph we're looking at. 1947, Sheldon's research interests and activities took a sharp turn when he was invited to serve as director of the Dite Institute for Human Genetics at the University of Minnesota. The Dite had been formed in 1941 with the support of an endowment from Dr. Charles F. Dite, an eccentric Minneapolis physician who had strong interest in public health and in genetics as it applied to humans. I love these people. Just how they whitewash this stuff. An eccentric Minneapolis physician, they call him. Yeah, that's what he was. Okay. Anyway, so then he left the endowment. This Oliver guy, I looked into him a long time ago. I don't remember much about him though. Served as first director, carried out the main functions of the will of that's Dr. Dite had stipulated, to provide courses and public lectures on human genetics, to initiate research studies, and to provide consultation and advice. And then Oliver left and Sheldon took over. Okay. Well, so who's Dite? I think we should come back to that. But here's a nice quote linking him to the rise of the genetic counseling field. He's the one that came up with the phrase. At the next meeting of the Dite Advisory Committee, he suggested genetic counseling is a more appropriate description of what they're doing. That's because genetic hygiene had baggage. Anyway, the members were not overly enthusiastic, but they accepted it because they didn't have anything better to offer. So I hope that does a reasonably good job of like showing some of these connections, right? We got Julian Savulescu explicitly describing genetic screening as actual eugenics. We have a guy who was an explicit eugenist. Remember, here he is, right? He's writing in the local eugenics society. He's explicitly eugenics, dude, and a main founder of genetic counseling. I mean, you should see how this is actual eugenics, the real thing, actual Nazism, if you will. Just toned down a little bit because unfortunately they don't have the power and the public support to go and round people up and throw them into ovens. Unfortunately, they would love to if they could, but they just can't. And anyway, some of their own friends might be burned, so they can't do that. Anyway, I mean, it's right there already. It's right there already. You can see it. You can trace it. You can. I'm gonna put my outline that I talked about here. I'll just show it to you again here. Where'd it go? Oh, I minimized it. There we go. You can go through and you can look at the quotes on this, which more extensively document this. There's our show and see read again. We will cover some of this stuff, but you already have enough now from this conversation, what we've talked about so far, to connect the dots, to see that there is something a little bit off about this whole thing, and maybe we should be a little bit more wide-eyed and observant about what is actually happening, because this is actually happening. This is actual eugenics in our society right now, operating under our very noses, in our hospitals, in our clinics, openly. Actual eugenics. So yeah, I'm a little bit miffed when I see people get annoyed by something like the Sydney Sweeney ad, because it's so disproportionate and so tame in compared to actual reality. Okay, so let's go on though. Let's continue. Let's talk about Dite. Dite's awesome. He was eccentric, as they say, right? I did have a link here. Here he is. Here's Dite. Yeah, Dite was a member of the Socialist Party. He was a progressive. They all were, right? He founded the Minnesota Eugenics Society, persuaded the Minnesota legislature to pass a sterilization law in 1925. He actively pursued the same type of eugenics as Nazi medicine. Well, that's curious. Why would a socialist progressive be involved in Nazism? Gee, it's almost like they're have affinities that no one either knows about or is willing to admit. But then he wrote a letter to Adolf Hitler himself. Well, let's take a look at that letter, friends. I have it. They might actually have it on this the Wikipedia page. They did not in the past, I believe, but they do now. Hey, where are you at? What? I got the wrong. Where is it? I got the letter. Just give me a second. I'll find it here. I'll just open it up another one. That's the easiest thing. We don't need to waste too much time. Yeah, so here's the letter. This is Dite, the founder of the eccentric founder of the Dite Institute, writing to Adolf Hitler, 1933. Presumably right after the passing of the sterilization law, and because it would have been right about the same time, August 1st. It's got to be close. Anyway, he said he is enclosing a clipping for Hitler from the Minneapolis Journal of Minnesota, in which he, as you can see there, he's praising. Let's let's blow it up here. This is the thing. The report persistently comes from Berlin that congenital feeble-mindedness, insanity, epilepsy, and some other serious conditions that are inheritable are to be stamped out among the German people. Adolf Hitler is having broad and scientific plans. Scientific credentials, experts, science. Excuse me. And scientific plans formed for this. If carried out effectively, it will make him the leader in the greatest national movement for human betterment the world has ever seen. The world's two great needs are cooperation in industry for social good and biological race betterment through eugenics. So that was a letter to the editor by this eccentric scholar, this socialist, this progressive. So anyway, he sent it to Hitler. I trust you will accept my, let's just read the whole thing. Relating to and praising your plan to stamp out mental inferiority among the German people, I trust you will accept my sincere wish that your efforts along that line will be a great success and will advance the eugenics movement in other nations as well as in Germany. Well, gee, I wonder why in the Nuremberg trials the Nazis tried to defend themselves from their charges by pointing to the American eugenicists who basically gave them the idea. Why would they do that, I wonder? So there's Dite. You're eccentric. He's the guy. He was involved in genetic counseling. We'll get rid of this image. Let's bring back this. I don't remember if this article talks about it here. Anyway, he wanted the genetic counseling. So I'll try to explain it to you. There's only there in 1930s to 1960s or so, there are only so many ways that you could actually get rid of a physically inferior person. There was killing them, was being tried at the time, or making sure that they can't breed. Abortion was not really an option. The technology for abortion was under development. It was obviously happening. Laws were still kind of against it, and it just wasn't it did not have the broad-based acceptance in society. So basically, like, the only thing they had left, in light of what happened in Germany, and in light of what was actually technically available, was just simply to talk people out of having children if they thought that they might be genetically defective. That was kind of all that they had. And that's why they doubled down on this so much. And this is why they poured so much effort into developing this crypto eugenics stuff. So let me give you another example to try to explain that in more detail. Maybe I'll just go to my outline on this one. Lots of good quotes in here. Lots of good quotes, and I'm just yeah, great stuff here. I'm trying to not get sidetracked. Where are we? I'm looking for Osborn. Let's get to Osborn. Eugenicists, there's Sheldon again. Frederick Osborn here. Here we go. Well, these are my notes, so it doesn't actually have the whole thing here. Let me pull this off to the side for a moment and get you another quote from Osborn. Actually, I have it on the... I actually already have it. I have it over here. We'll bring it up this way. here. Come back to that. So here we go. So the guy here is Frederick Osborn. He was the president of the American Eugenics Society. He worked in propaganda, actual propaganda. So he knows something about actual propaganda against the Nazis. Like the Nazis had their propaganda people, Americans had their propaganda people, and Osborn was one of them. He came back, and as they were regrouping, they were talking about as I said, the eugenicists were trying to find a way to reboot and relaunch eugenics in the world. So like, for example, you see here right there. Let me scroll down a little bit so you can see it better. The very word eugenics is in disrepute in some quarters, yet I still believe in Galton's dream. Probably most of you do. We must ask ourselves, what have we done wrong? And you can go back, you can go to my website and you can find this yourself. But essentially, since you can't just kill the people, telling people that they are genetically inferior was turning people off, as expected. A totally understandable reaction, right? So he says, people will accept the idea of a hereditary defect. They will go to a heredity clinic and ask, what is the risk of our having a defective child? But they won't themselves accept the idea that they are the ones who are second rate. Okay. So this is a few years after heredity clinics started popping up. And then this paragraph is kind of key. Oops, let's go down here. People will have children in proportion to their ability to care for them. In other words, he's like, okay, we've studied people. Excuse me. We know what they're like. We've analyzed how they make decisions about having children, something that they would study even more because they wanted to convince people not to have children. So when they turned their attention to population control more explicitly, they wanted to figure out why people wanted kids so that they could undermine those desires. And as you'll see here in this snippet, to try to get people to do what the eugenicists want, but have the people think it was their idea. That's where we're going with this. Anyway, if they feel financially secure, if they enjoy accepting responsibility, if they have warm, affectionate responses, if they're physically strong and competent, they are likely to have large families, which the eugenicists thought were okay. But if they're unable to feed the children they have, if they are afraid of responsibility, if their affectional responses are weak, people don't want children. If they have effective means of family planning, they won't have many. Our studies have shown this to be true all over the world. Credentials, experts, science. On such a base, it is surely possible to build a system of voluntary, unconscious selection. Let's just pause there for a moment on the phrase voluntary, unconscious selection. What are we talking about? What's the context? Francis Galton, evolution, eugenics, selection here. This is being used in the Darwinian sense. That's what this is. Okay? I mean, we can figure it out. Unconscious. In other words, people won't know why they're doing the selection that they're doing. They don't know where the ideas came from that got into their heads. But the selection they do will be voluntary. So, for example, let's just say Some guy wakes up in the morning, says, you know what? I don't want to have a child with blue eyes because let me rephrase. Just scrap that whole thing. I was going to try to get clever. Just forget that. Like voluntary unconscious selection. So in other words, they're hatching a scheme here. This is the crypto eugenics of deploying eugenics principles throughout society in such a way to have people carry out eugenics agendas and not know that it was the eugenicists that put the ideas in their head in the first place. Their idea is to paint pictures for people that will make them think, make them come to the conclusion on their own that they really should not be breeding. This is the word that eugenicists would use. So this is why they spend so much time on going the genetic counseling route with their application. It wasn't the only route they took, but it is actual eugenics according to the eugenicists themselves, both in the past and, as I showed you in the Savulescu quote, current day. And so to walk around and like to deny it is eugenics in nature. Is just to fly against reality itself. And it is a shame and a disgrace that more people, especially Christians, don't know about it, because we ought to know. Now, as for the secularists, these days they don't even know what a woman is, so we might be asking a little bit much of them. But, even they would not probably appreciate having somebody plant ideas in their heads about what they ought to do if they knew that was happening. So at the bottom here, it seems to me that if eugenics is going to progress, it must follow new policies and state its case anew, and that from this rebirth we may, even in our own lifetime, see it moving at last towards the high goals which Galton set for it. So before we move on from this, let's go on with something else that Osborn said, because it's relevant. But I'm not, as I said, I'm not going to go too deeply into the family planning aspect of it quite as much. But he's going to talk about that. So in his 68 book, which of course I own, Measures for Improving the Hereditary Base of Intelligence and Character can be made effective on a voluntary basis without arousing in the individual any conscious concern for eugenics results. And it is well that this is so. Eugenics goals are more likely to be attained under a name other than eugenics. I mean, this is what we're up against here. This is why I'm so cynical in a lot of ways, and this is why I'm so this is suddenly autobiographical. This is why the whole he's an expert, he's a scientist, he's got credentials, science, bludgeon doesn't work on me, because I've read what these people think, and I know how they think, and I know the strategies they've decided, and you cannot persuade me to a view just because a guy with a doctorate says so, because I know from my study that they lie, that they have figured out that they can't be honest about a lot of their views, and so they have to deceive people. And I refuse to be taken in that easily. Now, you, by all means, if you're a modern day liberal progressive, this probably describes you to a T. If a scientist tells you to jump off a bridge, by all means, you should do it, because, experts, you do that. That's fine. You can be the dupe if you want. I'm not going to be the dupe. So speaking of dupes, Osborn. So actually, here we go. Scroll down a little bit so you can read it. 2 months after Roe v. Wade passed, Osborn changed the name of the American Eugenics Society to Society for the Study of Social Biology. You would think this wouldn't work. All the smart liberals would catch on. No. The Society for the Study of Social Biology only relatively recently stopped their activities. They basically were able to get away with pursuing their crypto eugenics aims for quite much longer. And he says the change of the name. Oh, you might say, well, right. I can see your person who defers like mushy brained skulls full of mush. I believe that's Rush Limbaugh's phrase. Would say, well, maybe they had different aims. Well, no, the change of the name of the society does not coincide with any change of its interests or policies. Same plans, same desires, different name. And then Osborn himself explained, the name was changed because it became evident that changes of a eugenic nature would be made for reasons other than eugenics, and that tying a eugenic label on them would more often hinder than help their adoption. Birth control and abortion are turning out to be great eugenics advances of our time. If they had been advanced for eugenics reasons, it would have retarded or stopped their acceptance. So, presuming or pretending for a moment that I'm talking, or the person who's watching this might be a fierce proponent of family planning, I bet you 9 times out of 10, that same person would say they are vehemently against eugenics and disgusted by it, even though I'm sure they also support aborting children with birth defects in the womb. Sorry. I'm pretending that this person actually cares and finds that repulsive. Stay on target. Maybe you should ask the question, since the eugenicists themselves have plainly and explicitly said they want to deploy their policies through family planning and abortion on demand, to what degree are you furthering the eugenics cause? Have you considered this? Like, do you know? Have you wondered? I mean, now I'm telling you this now. It's probably the first time you've ever heard about it, because the basis for much of what you believe comes from 2 sentences in your social studies textbook in high school. But now you believe in abortion on demand, but you don't believe in eugenics. How do you parse that? Like, what are you? How do you think that looks in real life? Like, what are the people who are supporting abortion doing that has eugenic? Would you be able to tell them apart? Would you be able to identify it to make sure that you're not doing that? My money is on no. If I had to bet, this is literally the first time you've ever even heard about it. Which, I'm trying to awaken people to this reality in this podcast today. So I said I wasn't going to emphasize it too much, but I want to give some answer to that question. And I think we should start with Margaret Sanger. Let's just start with her here. So this is Margaret Sanger, 1921. Now, I do recognize that The progressives are slowly pushing out Margaret Sanger, but uh, they still lie about. Well, they have not tackled head on her own arguments in the sense that like she believes, as we're going to see in this essay, Sanger herself believed that birth control and eugenics, they were like this. But today's proponents of birth control and abortion on demand and family planning somehow think that it's not. Who knows more, the expert, Margaret Sanger, or these people, right? You got to defer to the experts. Science, Margaret Sanger says, must be true. So this is 1921. This is all on my website, eugenicsarchive.com. If you want to support this project of taking the quotes by eugenicists in their own words with very little commentary and just letting them speak for themselves, feel free to support. I guess the link, you can't see it, I have it cropped out. Donate to the cause so we can hire someone. I've got thousands and thousands of quotes that I would like to get on this site, and I don't have the time or the money to do it. But you could help me with that. Anyway, here we go. I think what I want to do with there's just so much good stuff in here. There are people who run around saying that Margaret Sanger had no interest in eugenics at all. Her birth control activities were completely independent, and it's propaganda and lies to say that she wasn't involved in any of that stuff. It's obvious and complete ignorance, if not outright lies. The Guttmacher Institute does that kind of crap. The left-wing media does, of course. So I think I will take just a little bit more time on this than I originally thought. But anyway, here's what she says. The eugenic and civilizational value of birth control is becoming apparent to the enlightened and the intelligent. What value? Is it to the woman? The individual woman? Is that what she's concerned about? A woman has a right to her own body. Every child that wants a child. Oh, no. Yeah, maybe to some degree, but also the eugenic and civilizational value. Well, if you don't agree, you're not enlightened and intelligent. In the limited space of this present paper, I have time only to touch on some of the fundamental convictions that form the basis of our birth control propaganda, in which, as I think you must agree, she is writing a eugenics document here. Excuse me, I take it back. This is in her own publication, the Birth Control Review. My bad. This is not a eugenics explicitly organization she's writing in. It's her own birth control thing, in which, as I think all of you other supporters of family planning must agree, indicate that the campaign for birth control is not merely of eugenic value, but is practically identical in ideal with the final aims of eugenics. Well, I wish she was more subtle, Margaret Sanger. I wish she'd beaten around the bush a little bit. I mean, is it, maybe compatible with some of the zeitgeist of what's going on? No. It's practically identical in ideal. Birth control is not merely of eugenic value. It is practically identical in ideal with the final aims of eugenics. This is what I mean when I hear people try to sell me stuff about, family planning's not really about that, or birth control is not really that. It's not really eugenics or whatever. You are absolutely clueless or utterly lying. The woman who was the number one person in bringing this into the country and then into the world She's the one that says it's identical. Like it does not get any more plainer than this. And people still deny it. I'm used to that. You just get used to people lying to you all the time. But it won't work on me. You're not going to be able to cow me into thinking otherwise, because I can see it with my own eyes. See, we are convinced that racial regeneration, like individual regeneration, must come from within. It must be autonomous, self-directed, not imposed from without. Remember, they supported birth control because they didn't really have any choices. By 1975, with Roe v. Wade and abortion on demand and the tech being there, they quickly, on a dime, turned. It's no longer birth control alone as the mechanism to bring about eugenics. Family planning and abortion. That's what they said. That's what they believe. In other words, every potential parent, and especially every potential mother, must be brought to an acute realization of the primary and central importance of bringing children into this world. Not until the parents of the world are thus given control over their reproductive faculties will it ever be possible not alone to maybe I transcribed something wrong there, to improve the quality of the generations of the future, but even to maintain civilization even at its present level. You should read The Pivot of Civilization, one of her books, to get a better idea what she means by that. Only by self-control of this type, right? This is what I'm saying. They didn't have the tech at that time. So they had to persuade people by telling them, your children are going to be defective, so don't have any. And then Osborn's like, that didn't really work. So now we need to trick people through involuntary, unconscious selection. Only by intelligent mastery of the procreative powers can the great mass of humanity be awakened to the great responsibility of parenthood. Now, I believe in the great responsibility of parenthood, but Sanger means something entirely different. She's talking about whether or not you can improve the quality of the generations of the future. She's talking about eugenics. Thirdly, we have come to the conclusion, based on widespread investigation and experience, that this education for parenthood and of parenthood must be based upon the needs and demands of the peoples themselves. She's talking about appealing to people's self-interest in order to do this. I mean, you could try to say what this is important to the race, and she does say that. She does in other places make that case explicitly, but basically she's saying that we're going to have to try to come to them in a way that does what we want without them knowing that it's exactly what we want, because by giving them something that they want. This is going to be kind of important in a moment. The almost universal demand for practical education is one of the hopeful signs. To direct a thorough education in eugenics based upon this intense self-interest, basically. Birth control propaganda is therefore thus the entering wedge for the eugenic educator. I want you to think about that. Keep that in mind as we go forward. In answering the needs of the thousands of pounds, I mean, I don't want to... This episode is not about birth control. It's about how people are being deceived into thinking that they support something without understanding that the people who launched it and guided and directed it even to this day have entirely different motives. And that is what real eugenics is, not a stupid genes ad. As an advocate for birth control, I wish to take advantage of the present opportunity. The balance between the unbalance between the birth rate of the unfit and the fit. Admittedly, the greatest present menace to civilization. As I was telling you about the guy who wrote an essay saying, "Hey, you're targeting my people as unfit. We need to be more carefully calibrate that." That guy was actually the vice president for population control for Planned Parenthood. Anyway, so yeah, there's a problem here. The unfit are having more children, so that's not good. We need to make sure. This is the thing. This is important here. In fact, it's so important. Let's spend the unbalance between the birth rate of the unfit and the fit. Admittedly, the greatest present menace to civilization can never be rectified by the inauguration of a cradle competition between these two classes. In this matter, the example of the inferior classes, the fertility of the feeble-minded, the mentally defective, the poverty-stricken classes should not be held up for emulation to the mentally and physically fit. On the contrary, the most urgent problem today is how to limit and discourage the over-fertility of the mentally and physically defective. Smells like genetic counseling. On the contrary, the most urgent problem today is how to limit and discourage the over-fertility of the mentally and physically defective. So it's kind of interesting in this context that when finally Margaret Sanger, as time went on, her American Birth Control League had its own publicity problems. She decided to rename her organization to Planned Parenthood. I guess I should have gotten this clip ready here. See if I have it over here. If I don't have this documented right when I say it, people are gonna be like, "No, he's making it all up." So let me just get a see if I find something here really quick. Yep, this will be fine. This will do the trick right here. Whoop. But maybe we'll just pause just 1 second here. So Margaret Sanger, she went around to KKK groups and gave her spiel, and you saw in her own words, the big problem. Oh, let's just bring it back up again. Let's not forget what the big problem was. Where is it here? The most urgent problem today is how to limit and discourage the over-fertility of the mentally and the physically defective. So time went on. She changed the name because she was getting bad press. And now that she's Planned Parenthood, she thinks to herself, what is the most urgent, pressing problem? Where do I start? The problem is so severe. We've got the over-fertility of the mentally and physically defective people. What shall I do? Where should I start with this huge problem? Oh, I'll start with the black people. Oh, yeah, the Negro Project. Yeah, baby, right here. The very first thing that she did was launch a program to reduce the number of black people. That's who she saw as the unfit. And we could document this in any number of different ways. The roots of Planned Parenthood and how they continue today. But, I'm trying to get to the point that, yeah, this is actual real eugenics. And the Negro Project was just crazy. And it's exactly what she described in that article that I showed you. How can we get eugenics goals out there, framed in a way that the people who are adopting them won't know it's eugenics? How can we feed into their own self-interest? So, first you identify your most genetically inferior people, and in her mind, that was black people. And then she said, how can we meet their self-interest? Right? So that's what they did with the Negro Project. Trying to find ways to help Black people in a way that the Black people themselves thought they needed help, and to make them make the right choice, not to breed. And there's some really, really great quotes that we have because of this Negro Project. And as I said, I'm not going to emphasize it too much, and I'll move on. But here's a quote here. Let's get it for you. Is it this one? Yep, right here. This is a quote from a letter that she wrote to Clarence Gamble, who she wanted. Well, maybe I'll come back to that. But she sent, this is a letter to Clarence Gamble, I believe. Just double check. I have all this stuff off to the side already here. In fact, why don't I just show you the first page of the letter so that you can see what I'm talking about. I want people to understand that, yeah, I have credentials. I know something about this, but I'm not making this stuff up either. I mean, there's a reason why I have these views. I can back up every single thing that I'm saying with actual documentary proof. So this is here you go. This is Sanger to Gamble. I'm pretty sure this is to Gamble. Describing this. Did I have it right? Or is this the wrong one? Sorry. The problem is I have so much stuff. Oh, no. I think this is it right here. Yep. I'm sorry. I got it. My bad. That was a different thing put on by them. Yeah, there's so many, right? That's the problem. There's just so many. So there's the first page to Gamble. Here's the money shot. Second page. I would like to be in touch. This is 39. The Negro Project. You see that the quote basically lines up there. Mrs. Rose sent me a copy of the letter. You can see that now. And then just because there's going to be people who are like, you're making it up. Ignorant people. People who are stupid. There you go. Margaret Sanger. Yeah. Not making anything up. Bite me. So anyway, here's what she was writing in there. I note that you doubt it worthwhile to employ a full-time Negro physician. She's replying to Campbell, right? They're having a debate about this. But it seems to me, she says, she's trying to persuade him otherwise. Seems to me that from my experience, where I had been, while the colored Negroes have great respect for white doctors, they can get closer to their own members or more or less lay their cards on the table, which means their ignorance, superstitions, and doubts. We are talking about, according to Sanger, the genetically unfit, the genetically inferior, their ignorance, superstitions, and doubts. This is her first target. She can start anywhere. There's so many genetically inferior people out there. Where does Margaret Sanger start? She can only think of one place, the Negro population, with their ignorance, superstitions, and doubts. They do not do this with the white people, and if we can train the Negro doctor at the clinic, he can go among them with enthusiasm and with knowledge, which I believe will have far-reaching results among the colored people. His work, in my opinion, should be entirely with the Negro profession and the nurses, hospital social workers, as well as the county's white doctors. His success will depend upon his personality and his training by us. Training in what, I wonder? I don't know, maybe not the eugenics stuff, because that might give the game away. Anyway, also the minister. Never underestimate the minister. The minister's work is also important. He should also be trained, perhaps by the Federation, as to our ideals and the goal that we hope to reach. Well, we just learned about what those are. But we do not want word to go out that we want to exterminate the Negro population. And the minister is a man who can straighten out that idea if it ever occurs to any of their more rebellious members. Yeah, so the defenders of Sanger are like trying to they respond to this, say, well, they're just trying to say they don't want the black people, the ones with ignorant superstitions and doubts, to get the wrong idea about things. I mean, because let's just bring it back here. Let's make sure we know who we're talking about here. Oops. On the contrary, the most urgent problem today is how to limit and discourage the over-fertility of the mentally and physically defective. Let's start with the black people. And why would they possibly think, from a person like Margaret Sanger, what she had said only 17 years before this, maybe, why would they possibly think that she wants the Negro population stamped out? I mean, really, we'll just, yes, the Margaret Sanger defender is like, yeah, she would never think that. No. Come on now. Don't pee on my leg and tell me it's raining. You just saw in Sanger's own words exactly what she thought about the greatest problem. And now you see who she thought the biggest problem was. No. She wanted to exterminate the black people. Come on now. Come on, admit it. That's the plainest interpretation of this. Come on now. Just admit it. You can try to distance yourself from, but I'm not that. I would never do that. That's not me. But don't tell me that's not what she actually had in mind. Sorry. Just can't buy it. From the woman who went to KKK groups and whatever, yeah. We do not want word to go out that we want to exterminate the Negro population. And who did we turn to for that? The minister. The minister. Ooh. This is one of the things that burns me up about the clergy of today, in fact. And I understand. I mean, I'm torn on this. The pulpit should be a place to proclaim the gospel. But if you're not being equipped by people who are respected, like your minister, being equipped to deal with this stuff, then you are being left vulnerable to great exploitation by people who hate you. They have no problem using the minister. And meanwhile, our ministers sometimes are afraid to bring up these topics because maybe they'll lose parishioners, or a lot of times they also don't know because they don't think that it's important. But by golly, you should know, because you don't want to be a dupe, and you want to make sure your parishioners know what's going on, I would think, and have a genuinely Christian response to it, I would think. But hey, I'm not a trained theologian, so what would I know? I'm just a dude. Okay, so I've been going on now for almost, how long has it been? Is there a timer here somewhere? Oh, hour and a half. Where should we go next? Okay. I think I've done a fairly good job of demonstrating the direct and explicit connection between genetic counseling and actual eugenics. And I've done a pretty good job, I think, of showing that there's other things that were also seen as explicitly eugenics. Family planning, at least in its origins. I mean, if you can find a way to make it non-eugenics, then God bless it. And obviously, there is going to be a way. Maybe I'll come back to that in a little bit. Just like there's a way for genetic counseling to not be eugenics also, but you have to be on your guard. You can't be a dupe. Anyway, I think I've done a pretty good job of establishing that these are, at least they ought to be in your mind, live hypotheses about what's out there. And on my website, eugenicsarchive.com, you can go and you can find more quotes. And if you have any integrity whatsoever and any ability to research, you can find plenty of documentation on this. But this is not supposed to be an academic lecture. This is supposed to be a response to this ridiculous idea that a stupid genes ad is actual eugenics when compared to actual eugenics being deployed in the world. And I do have plenty to say about it, but let's try to move it along, I guess. Let's go back to the outline here. I tied it back with here's your heredity clinics. How do I I think what I'm going to do, you can just see all the quotes that I've assembled. These were my notes for the presentation I was telling you about. So, I mean, there's even more besides, some of which made it onto the website, but a lot hasn't, as I said. I think here's the way I'm going to cap it off. Let's talk about the number of children born with Down syndrome in Iceland, and then we'll see where things go. This is one of the things that I wanted to bring up in the podcast that I was not. Do I have the right quote here? Yes. But I see I clipped off the part that says, oh, yeah. No, it does. It references. You see there under legal framework, Icelandic law. So, yeah, we're talking about Iceland. Yeah, it's in the first stupid sentence. Around 80 to 85% of pregnant women in Iceland choose to undergo prenatal testing. I've already talked about the roots of that, such as combination testing, blah, blah. Of those pregnancies diagnosed with Down syndrome, nearly 100% are terminated. This is eugenics. Icelandic law permits abortions after 16 weeks if the fetus has a deformity, including Down syndrome. Minnesota has now made it 20 weeks. Great people there. Minnesota nice. In 2019, the gestational limit for abortion was extended to 22 weeks for any reason. I don't know what the current status is. This looks like a AI summary, so it would not surprise me if it's even further than that. I don't know. On average, only 1 or 2 children with Down syndrome are born in Iceland each year. This is eugenics. So Iceland basically loves disabled people so much, they make sure that they're dead before they're born. I just feel overwhelmed by their compassionate acceptance of people with birth defects who don't exist because they kill them. Just such a lovely group of people, and it's not just Iceland. It's throughout the world, Europe of course. China, yeah, absolutely. Many U.S. states deliberately and explicitly targeting disabled people in the womb, which I have now shown fairly conclusively is eugenics. The numbers I think I have here. Here we go. I'll just bring up a whole nother one here. I think I have it right here. And I need to make it so you can see it. Studies indicate high termination rates for these conditions, with one meta-analysis showing an overall frequency of 83% for anencephaly and 63% for spina bifida. I don't remember what it was for Down syndrome. These are the United States rates, as I recall. So pretty high, right? And there's a lot of, reasons for it or whatnot. What happens is people, they get the diagnosis, they talk to their genetic counselor. Hopefully, at least, unlike in my case, they talk with the genetic counselor like before they're asked by the doctor if they want to kill it. But this is actual eugenics, right? This is the thing. This is the goal. And it is complicated. I understand, because parents do want this information. You do want the best of your kid. But if our solution to this problem is to kill people before they're born, that's not good. And you're certainly never going to find a cure or fair treatments for some of these conditions if you're just getting rid of the people who have them. Like, that's like, ending cancer by just shooting all the cancer people in the head. You're not going to find a treatment that way. You will have ended their suffering. Congratulations. But there's sort of an obvious intellectual disconnect there. But it doesn't, no one seems to recognize this in regards to the unborn. I think I would do well if I have it here. Yeah, and I do. I talked about Julian Savulescu. He was involved with a couple beautiful people. Actually, I think maybe first I'll finish off the Iceland thing. So anyway, this brings it to this brings to a head the question. Like, what kind of society do we want, really? Because apparently we're getting the society that the eugenicists wanted. So congratulations for going along with that. This guy from Iceland says, my understanding is we have basically eradicated almost Down syndrome from our society. What does the 100% terminate rate, do you think, reflect about Icelandic society? It reflects a relatively heavy-handed genetic counseling. Now, see, genetic counseling, okay, let me finish his thought. And I don't think that heavy-handed genetic counseling is desirable. You're having an impact on decisions that are not medical in a way. Oh, that's a strange admission, don't you think? They're not actually medical. You were told they're medical. Also, this idea of heavy-handed genetic counseling. So you can get into the discuss, like, if you access the discussions by the genetic counselors, for example, with themselves, they say that they are non-directive, that they're not trying to put ideas into people's heads, which is a little bit hard to believe. I know that there are some, fine, they're non-directive. Some of the other ones, given the business they've chosen, you got to wonder if they really mean it. But in Iceland, apparently, this non-directive nature, this guy does not think that's actually happening, that it's heavy-handed genetic counseling. So what happens is, and I don't know if this is what he's describing exactly, but it all comes down to like how it's presented and what to the parent. Like if you are not, remember when it happened to us, we were shell shocked. We were in a state of mind of essentially grief. We had found out in a way that the child that we had imagined was not going to be, right. That ideal, that idea, that vision died, and we were grieving in a sense, right. And that's the state of mind that we were being talked with. And so now if the genetic counselor says, well, you know, they're going to have a bad life. It's going to be difficult. There's going to be a lot of suffering involved, things like that. Or if the genetic counselor says, you know, there's a lot of families out there that are still very happy. They found a way to get through. It's been okay. You can do it. So you got two different presentations of the same realities. If you are that parent finding like grieving, and you're presented with, wow, your life is going to be hell, and so will the life of your child, then you will voluntarily, unconsciously make a selection, won't you? See what I'm saying? And I have a feeling that it's that kind of thing being described here by this guy, the founder of Decode Genetics in Iceland. Heavy-handed genetic counseling. They might call it non-directive, but it probably isn't. I don't think there's anything wrong with aspiring to have healthy children, but how far we should go in seeking those goals is a fairly complicated decision, apparently. So now let me go to this guy here. Here, I mentioned earlier that there are people who believe that the same arguments for abortion on demand should apply all the way through infanticide. And here's an example of this. This is Geneva and what's her names? Can never say their names. From a medical ethics. Well, I should just get it, right? Here it is. I had it ready. Because I don't make up stuff. Jubilini and Minerva. Afterbirth abortion. Why should the baby live? Good stuff here. And I guess since I've already got it here, I'll just kind of I'll just leave this up instead. Let's get rid of this stupid thing. Now, this stuff here about genetic testing, prenatal testing, you already see that this is basically eugenics, right? They're talking about the European ones, and then there are still, you can almost hear under their breath, unfortunately, about 1,700 infants born with Down syndrome without the parents being aware of it. Of these, once these children are born, there's no choice for the parents but to keep the child, which sometimes is exactly what they would not have done if the disease had been diagnosed before birth. But there's a solution. Why not kill them after they're born? What's the problem? That's what this article is about. This scholarly article. It's a journal article. Experts, credentials, science. Right? Yeah, so here we go. Where's it at? I mean, you can read it. You can find it here. What I'm looking for is where they say because a lot of times the arguments for killing these people is that they're going to be miserable. Oh, here it is. But in fact, unfortunately, people with Down syndrome are often reported to be happy. Oh, crap. Well, there goes our they're going to suffer really forever article or belief, right? So what do we do? What do we do? Because apparently they're not going to have miserable lives. At least it's not like absolutely certain that they will. What do we do? Well, nonetheless, they argue to bring up such children might be an unbearable burden on the family and on society as a whole. There you have it. There's your eugenics. There's the whole thing. The going back to Savulescu, actually, it was in his journal that this is published in, by the way. It's not just the family, it's society as a whole. When the state economically provides for their care. So tax dollars are there. So, we hate to have the state involved, but it is state money. So they're going to have to. And so, on these grounds, the fact that a fetus has the potential to become a person who will have at least acceptable life is no reason for prohibiting abortion. Therefore, we argue that when circumstances occur after birth, such that they would have justified abortion, what we call afterbirth abortion should be permissible. Problem solved. Did they miss the defective person in the prenatal scan? No worries. We could kill it in the womb, but I know this didn't happen. Not an option for you. You can still kill it. What's the problem? We've already got all the arguments for euthanasia and infanticide, and there's state money involved. It's very expensive to care for these people, and the government picks up a lot of that cost. All the arguments for abortion should allow for afterbirth abortion, and so on and so forth. So they specifically talk about changing the words, changing the names, so it's, less baggage and stuff. Your typical liberal today falls for that stuff absolutely quickly. Accordingly, a second terminological specification is that we call such a practice afterbirth abortion rather than euthanasia. Because apparently we live in a world that you can just change definitions or change the words, and no one cares. I mean, it's just all propaganda anyway. I'm digressing a little bit. So go back to this and wrap this up here. So these are the people that we're dealing with. People who are part of this, a framework of social control that goes back to Malthus and Darwin and Galton and Sanger and Frederick Osborn and Guglielmi and Minerva. They're all the same people. They're all the prism changes sometimes because of the circumstance. You've got before the Holocaust and after the Holocaust, and so that dictates strategy a little bit. And, sometimes words fall out of favor, like euthanasia, and we need a new word like afterbirth abortion. But it's all, the species has to look after itself. The state might be economically taking care of them. They might be happy, but by golly, they're expensive. It's eugenics. That is eugenics. Is it Nazism? I mean, I guess I'll let you wrestle with that. But I know one thing. This advertisement for genes sure as hell is not Nazism, is not eugenics. The things that I've described, 60 to 100% of the termination of disabled people in the womb, counseled by people whose entire field was formed by actual eugenicists. That's eugenics. You want to get upset about eugenics being accepted? Get upset about that. That's eugenics. Be angry. Yeah, and it is pretty much Nazi. They're National Socialists. Remember Charles Diet? Socialist. They were all progressives. Margaret Sanger, progressive. Yeah, they're back. Let me take a minute here and talk about some of the more difficult things that, because, and I have alluded to this a little bit. Not every time that you use the word gene means that eugenics is in play, right? Because you can talk about genes without invoking eugenics, at least in principle. Although, what's his face? Didn't seem to. Sheldon Reed said they're the same. I don't think that I agree with him. You can talk about birth defects without talking about killing them. You can struggle with these things without necessarily being a fascist. I mean, my wife and I struggled, maybe not with the question of bringing the daughter into the world, but obviously, we wanted to know about Spina Bifida. We wanted to be prepared. It seems to me acceptable and appropriate that there should be people in the world who have this information and are ready to share it with parents who now have to wrestle with difficult circumstances. Yes, we should, but we should also be on guard, right? We should be wary. We should be careful. We should look for multiple sources of information. If your genetic counselor sits in front of you and lays out a bad scenario, or get a second opinion, man. Don't just go off on that. Don't be rushed into making a decision. I told you that our doctor, the one that presented us with this diagnosis, then tried to make us regret our decision. He spent the next couple months after that telling us, "Oh, our daughter is going to have such a hard life." He told us she won't even have a brain. She has a brain, people. I really don't like that guy. Get a second opinion. Don't be pushed into things. I don't know if we can sit here right now and make any kind of like state level or national level verdict on how to handle all these situations. But I'm saying don't be a slave. Don't be a dupe. Don't be gullible. Know what your beliefs are. Know what your principles are. Figure them out before you're in the difficult situation so that you're not just easily pushed around when you're in it. And you should ask yourself, like if you live in Iceland or some of these European countries or liberal states, that maybe is a cheap shot because it's everywhere, right? You should ask yourself, well, what kind of world do we want to really be in? Do we want to live in the world that's been molded by and handed down to us by the eugenicists who have secretly put their thumbs on the scales? Or do we want a world that is actually genuinely open to disabled people, such that we won't just kill them in the womb and consider ourselves compassionate? And that might have a national response, truly, of, okay, well, let's back it up with more money. In fact, I think that one of the interesting things, we get in arguments about taxes and stuff, about things. Actually, a lot of people agree that the weak and the vulnerable, that's actually what we do want our tax money spent on. and instead we spend it on stupid stuff. So I don't think like when the state economically cares for them, that is actually people generally don't have a problem with that. Only the fascist eugenicists are like, oh well, the Malthusians. There's only so many resources to go around. Those jerks. Those people care about that. The rest of us are like, no, we'll take care of them. And that's actually something you can get agreement on among conservatives and liberals and progressives and decent people just about anywhere. And even if we don't necessarily agree that we should be funding everything that way, we could be more generous with our laws that allow for giving to charities and so on and so forth. We can do something about this without accepting the premise that just because they cost money, the state should be involved by putting their thumb on the scale on this. So I just wanted to make sure that the folks know, because I lived through it. Like, I understand that there's real world dilemmas that are involved in some of these things about how many children to have and whatnot, and how that all works and whether or not you're ready to have a kid. And just don't listen to those people even about like that with like family size or whatever. You don't, no, those people are not on your side. They probably don't even like you. They would prefer if you didn't exist. You can find quotes how they think there should only be like 600 million people left like on the planet, right? So or less. Actually, I think the Stones down, where was that? I think they only wanted 100 million. What were those called? Guidestone stones. Anyway, that means that these people would like to see 6 billion people vanish overnight if they could do it, right? These people are not on your side. They don't like people. They're anti-human. They're anti-humanists. Don't seek out your opinions from them. They hate you. So anyway, go ahead. Contact me if you want more information about this stuff. If you want me to speak, I mean, I haven't done it in a while, but I'm happy to. I guess ultimately, I mean, why not? As you can see, I have lots to say and lots of things that I didn't say even now, but I wanted to present something where if you really wanted to know where eugenics actually was in our society, there's many places, but it's not the genes ad. I've told you where you can find it. So now that you know, what are you going to do about it? Dr. Anthony Horvath, Gutencast. Thanks for watching. That's all, folks. Okay, so if you weren't here at the very beginning to hear me say that was actually pre-recorded to make sure that I covered everything that I wanted to cover. It also allowed me to engage with chat a little bit more without being distracted. I'm not gonna stay on much longer here unless comments come in. I am checking it, watching that. So this will be your last minute to post questions or comments if you have them. I wanted to bring up some a book that I alluded to this time, and maybe in the previous one as well. Zero population growth for whom? So like the question is, what's the connection between the population control people, eugenics, the euthanasia people, and in actuality, they're all kind of either the same people, or they've grabbed hold of one facet of it and kind of ran with it, usually for their own personal career gain. But this book is a really funny example of that. I say funny because So, well, let's look at the title again. Zero population growth for whom? So back in the 70s, in the late 60s, there was a group called the Zero. Well, there was a movement, the Zero Population Movement, but I think there was actually an organization by that name as well. And the whole idea was we need to bring the population level straight down. We need to flatline it. There's too many people. But the problem was that whenever you got into that conversation and you were a person who like believed in um, Darwin and you believed in eugenics and you believed survival of the fittest and you were concerned about the possibility that the people who were actually competent to further the race were going to be the ones having less children, there began surfacing many conversations about, okay, we're going to reduce the population, but maybe we don't want to do that across the board. Maybe we want some subpopulations to continue to grow and others not. But anyway, so there was a conference. The what was the name of it? The American Jewish Society. Who was it again? The American Jewish Committee decided, this is 75. They felt singled out by all this. They're like, hey, why are you trying to kill us when there's so many other, well, reduce the population, control our birth rate. Why are you trying to control our birth rate? You know, we're like the scholars, we're the smart people, we're the amazing people. Shouldn't you be focusing your attention on other people? And so they actually convened a conference about this. Zero population, but for whom? It can't just be everyone. We got to keep the fine human specimens going and only push back against the weak ones. So anyway, so a bunch of scholars, including Frederick Jaffa, whom I alluded to in this broadcast today, who was at the time the vice president for Planned Parenthood for population control, was one of the persons who presented in this at this conference. And I'm not going to tell you the subpopulation that they thought we should probably have fewer of, but judging from this tonight's podcast, I bet you can figure it out. So thanks for watching. Like, subscribe, hit the notification bell. So much more to say in the future, but we're going to wrap it up here. Let me just double check comments on Rumble. Nothing on Rumble. So that's it, folks. Thanks again for watching. You guys have a great evening. We're a wrap.